Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. How are you guys today? This has been a tumultuous afternoon. I don't know, lately it's been a lot, but anyway, I'm over it. I just wanted to see what how your week has been. It's been an amazing um, week here in California. Unfortunately, we had four girls that were hit on the PCH out in Malibu who were killed because this guy was going 110 miles an hour. 22-year-old driving a BMW going 110 miles an hour. He's now they at first they arrested him and then they let him go. He is now being arrested for murder for four young girls who were in their senior freaking year of at Pepperdine. This is unbelievable, and it's so upsetting that stuff like this is happening to um, young people. Because I'm sorry, but a lot of y'all aren't listening. People are trying to tell you and give you advice and be there for you and try and make sure that your life is a good life, and you don't want to listen to it. You think we don't know anything if we're parents and so on and so forth. So it is a sad travesty that's going on out in these streets, and I can only hope that some of you grow up and try and put things in perspective, because 22 years old and now you going to jail for murder. Now, granted, whatever a person does, they should have to pay for it. But I am just befuddled and bewildered at this whole traumatization with what's going on right now in these streets. But on to some other things. I was talking to a guy this morning, and he was telling me that, you know, he's high functioning autism. And so I was really enamored by that, because basically he explained to me that, he has a lot of anxiety. Because I asked him, I was like, well, how do you know, diagnosis wise? And he was like, well, I was diagnosed at the age of 3. And so a lot of things in regard to autism is a developmental disability caused by differences in the brain. People with ASD, or autism spectrum disorder is what it's called, often have problems with social communication and interaction, and they're restricted, or they have repetitive behaviors of interest, like maybe they have tics or whatever. But people with ASD may also have different ways of learning, so moving or paying attention. And it's really interesting to me, because I know that in our world, it's always a name for something, right? And it's interesting to me, because when we have these different names for these different disorders, it makes it harder for us to really fathom that they exist, because it's like, this wasn't here 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and now it's here. So, what are we supposed to believe? So, with that being said, I felt like it was something that warranted us having a discussion, because again, some people talk about how they have high function, how they're able to highly function with autism. But there are other scenarios where, let's say restricted or repetitive behaviors or interests. So people with ASD behaviors or interests, they can seem unusual to you and to me, but they have these behaviors or interests that set them apart from other conditions. So they're defined by like problems with social communication and interaction. And so, say for instance, maybe they line up all their toys and different objects, and they get upset when the order is changed. This is very upsetting to them. Or maybe they repeat words or phrases over and over. You know, and that's called echoli, echolalia, 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 echolalia. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that, but I just want to make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. But anyway, maybe they play with toys the same way every single time, and you start to notice these things as parents. Or, um, from my understanding, I mean, I'm not so sure that this cannot be diagnosed in adulthood if it had not been diagnosed as young infants or young adults. Okay, I don't know why I'm having problems with. I'm so just a little frustrated. So let me just regroup for a second. Um, with what's going on with me, because I'm so over it. It's a constant issue with one or more device. And one of my devices, I'm only taping Spotify on it, but I swear it's like somebody out there is such a hater that they don't want me to succeed because my Spotify keeps getting hacked, and I'm not understanding that because it shouldn't be. But with that being said, I'm gonna move on because there's another way I can upload on Spotify later. But maybe their focus, getting back to our ASD and talking about autism. Again, I'm not sure that autism is not something that can be diagnosed within as an adult. I don't know if it's something that only can be diagnosed in young people at a very young age. But I'm sure that if there is a way to diagnose, there is, it could be done for anyone of any age. But the interesting thing is right now, what we're discussing signs and symptoms that you might notice of someone that might have autism. And so if there is someone in your world that children or anyone, and you have concerns, you might want to watch for some of these things. Are they focused on parts of objects? For example, maybe they're looking at a little toy truck or whatever, but they can only focus on the wheels. You know, maybe they get upset by minor changes, just minute changes. They're obsessive interests. So they're interested in something, but it's obsessive, and they have to follow a certain routine. Maybe they flap their hands or they rock their body or they spin themselves in circles or have unusual reaction to the way things sound, smell, taste, or even look. So these are things that you want to look at. Now, most people with ASD have other related characteristics, like they might include delayed language skills. And so, you know, maybe they stammer or stutter or something like that, or somehow their cognitive learning skills are delayed, or delayed movement skills. And maybe they have hyperactive, impulsive, and interactive behavior, or inattentive behavior, rather. Epilepsy and seizures can also would also be part of this disorder, unfortunately. But also, um, they have unusual eating and sleeping habits, gastrointestinal issues, for example, constipation. I mean, that alone would not be a reason why someone would have ASD, but along and coupled with some of these other things going on may very well be a, a cause of what's going on with your person. So when we talk about these disorders, it's imperative that we learn what are people, whether they're young or old, what their typical behaviors are, and things of that nature. But for the most part, unusual mood or emotional reactions, anxiety, stress, or excessive worry, lack of fear or more fear than expected. So, you know, the movie Rain Man comes to mind because I believe in that movie, I'm not sure when autism was officially introduced to our world, but what I can say is that that movie, if I'm not mistaken, Rain Man had autism because some people, some um, of the patients that have autism, they find are extremely intelligent, you know, but developmentally monitoring is an active ongoing process for of watching a child and basically a child grow and encouraging just conversations between parents and even their provider is extremely important about their children's skills and their abilities. And they want to monitor their developmental monitoring and make sure that they're doing things on a norm. Because a lot of times take on this can take on a lot of things that we really weren't aware of happening to our children. So, with that being said, it's so important that we monitor what's going on within our children's lives, as well as making sure that we are keeping a focus on the things that are happening with our people, with our young person, you know because this is something that if you let go by, you could stunt the development of your child and you want them to have the best opportunity of learning that is possible. That's the most important thing I think that comes to mind for me is that my child or children would have the opportunities that other children have in learning the things that they need to learn. And if that happens and you don't have them set up with your provider to know these things that are going on or what have you, then you want to talk to your children's provider, their um, PCP, which is a primary care physician, or their um, pediatrician, and get more information on these things. So I don't know. It's a lot, I know, with our world, but I really think, I don't know what you all think, but I think it has a lot to do with our food, some of the things that are being placed in the air, things of that nature that are coming out that we're finding that have affected our, not even just ourselves, but our children, pets, whatever, whoever, and all these things, all the above. You know, there's a lot going on because of the environment. You know, when you, if basically, if you are trying to figure out about autism, you could sometimes, it can be detected in as early as 18 months. And when, if something like that happens, then you definitely want to make sure that you are learning all the things that you need to know about your child and what kinds of things that you need to monitor, because diagnosing autism disorder can be difficult because there's no medical test like blood work or a way to diagnose the disorder. Doctors just look at a child's development, and if historically they gauge it based on certain things and find that these things are not happening, then they're going to use that as a gauge to try and decipher whether or not a child has autism. So by age 2, they're basically saying a child's functionality should be at a certain level. And a diagnosis by an experienced professional can be considered reliable. However, like many kids and children don't receive a final diagnosis until they're a little bit older than 2, because they're trying to gauge things with a umbrella that has been used for years for many children of that age and of their caliber. And some people aren't diagnosed until they're adolescents or adults. So again, when I was saying earlier, I didn't know if you could be diagnosed as adults, and definitely you can. So these delays mean that people with ASD basically might not get their early help that they need. And that's what I'm saying. You want to make sure that they're able to learn what they need to learn. But sometimes with developmental diagnosis, there's some tests like a screening tool that's done by a doctor, but it can indicate roughly whether a child is on the right developmental track. Like I was saying, they'll gauge it and say, yeah, they're doing this or they're not doing this or whatever and whatnot. But the main thing is to let somebody in on it. Let them know what's going on with your child so that basically they can start diagnosing or looking at these things early on. I just can't take it. I really can't take it. I don't know. For one, I have this droid, okay? And what I'm trying to figure out is the screen. Okay, record audio and show touches. Start. I just don't understand it sometimes because I've had an iPhone for so long. And so the screen keeps powering down. But like with the iPhone, when you have certain apps open, it doesn't power down. So this is driving me nuts. And I love learning new stuff. But at the same time, I hate when it affects the show because I try to be professional and try to get things, I want to succeed. And so um, I know I don't have a lot of viewers and I don't have a lot of listeners, but at the same time, it's important for me to present well. So I'm just frustrated. So I apologize for that. But again, with the diagnoses, Asperger's syndrome is now including several conditions that is used to diagnose separately, but autism disorder, uh, pervasive dis- element, pervasive dis- pervasive development disorder, not otherwise specified as PDD or NOS, and Asperger's syndrome. So your doctor or other healthcare provider can help you understand and navigate the diagnosis properly. But I just thought this warranted a conversation because there's so much going on when it comes down to disorders. And it's interesting that people may or may not have uh, had an opportunity to even pay attention to that, what's going on with their children. I know a friend of mine, very young one, had a daughter, and her daughter, it was funny because I had a job where I was actually being taught what, get out of here. Are you kidding me? Oh, oh my gosh, I could not. Anywho, her daughter couldn't hear. And because she could not hear, basically what ended up happening was move, 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 move. We are not doing this today, sir. We are not. And I told you there's things that I do not appreciate. So no, 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 no. But her daughter, I was on a job and I was in a class, and her I just learned that in my um, class for this job, we had learned about what types of things we should observe if we notice someone couldn't hear very well. And so I was doing my studying and I was at her house and I was visiting and we were talking, and I noticed that her daughter was doing a lot of these things. And in my mind, I was like, no, I'm just imagining this. Long story short, thank God she took her daughter to the doctor, and to this day, she wears a hearing aid. And I'm not sure if she learned sign language or not, but she always tells me, if it wasn't for you, my baby, I wouldn't have been able to, um, her wouldn't have known that she had a hearing impairment. So again, we each one teach one. We help each other, and we try to do the things that we need to do to help each other. With the developmental approaches, there's sensory integration therapy, which can help. These are things that help with the developmental approaches that they have found, that they use speech and language therapy, occupational therapy, and sensory integration therapy helps to improve responses to the sensory input that may be restrictive and overwhelming for them. They also have physical therapy, and it can help and improve their physical skills, such as fine movements of the fingers or larger movements of the trunk and the body. So, the Early Start Denver model, which is ESDM, is a broad developmental approach based on a principle of applied behavior and analysis, and it's used with children that are from 1 years old up to 2 years old, or 12 to 48 months, basically. Parents and therapists use play and social exchanges, as well as any shared attention in natural settings, to improve language and social learning skills. So there is hope, but there's a lot of celebrities who have children who have ASD, and they basically have funds and funding, not funding, but um, they have different. Uh, I want to say associations, but the word is escaping right now. They have different organizations that they formed, and that you can look up and see if somehow these can be somewhat fundamental for you and assisting you in what you're going through if you experience this with your young person. But for the most part, I think that educational approaches and treatments are given in a classroom setting also. One type of educational approach is the treatment and education of autistic and related communication handicapped children. And that the acronym is TEACH, but it has two C's in it. So TEACCH approach. And it's based on the idea that people with autism thrive on consistency and visual learning. And it also provides teachers just a general way to basically adjust the classroom structure so that it's set up in a way that is less invasive on their sensory as well as their visual perception, but it improves their academic and their other outcomes for an ASD child, which I think is extremely um, awesome when you have teachers being educated so that they can help in the classroom, and you as a parent let worry less about what's going on. But even for an example, in their daily routines, they can say be written or drawn and placed in a clear. They could be writing or drawing, um, but it could also be like they do these I wouldn't say there are they called the 501c programs, where they basically have a clear cut type of curriculum for this particular child or children. So their daily routine is basically going to be written or drawn and placed in clear sight so that they can see that. And then they have boundaries that will be used to make sure that they are following these boundaries. So, but anyway, this has been this edition of Wishes for the World. And my wish is that we all are able to assist by paying attention more and helping our young people and anyone in our family recognize anything that may be different or become seem apparent to be an apparent challenge for our young people, and we reach out to someone who can assist us in those arenas. But thank you so much for listening. I welcome you back for our next segment of Trending Topics, and I'll be right back in about 5 minutes to bring us our trending topics, which is in our celebrity news. I'll see you in a moment.